I'm Tal Jacobson from SimilarWeb. I'm in charge of the business development, M&As, partnerships, and basically data, since we are a data company. And we're going to go through some data and statistic about the entire ecosystem of mobile. I'm going to show you some cool mobile strategies through data. Some of them are very good for indie developers, some of them for bigger companies. So just a few words about SimilarWeb before we will begin. So you'll have a background how we got to the insights that we're going to show today. So SimilarWeb is a data company. We've been around for 8 years now. We are the only company that is doing the entire ecosystem of digital, online. So websites, mobile web, desktop web, and apps. We're basically a competitive intelligence tool. So go online, go to our site, put any app or website, and see how they're doing their marketing strategy, how they're getting traffic, what people are doing once they get there. And most of it is free, so just go online and use it. So we're going to start from basic, and then we'll go deeper. So how many of you actually are game developers or app developers? Okay. Other companies, what? Media? No? Okay. So when you're building an app, well, you need to ask yourself, am I going to build that for both platforms? Am I going to build that for iOS? Am I going to build that for Android? And here are the statistics. So on iOS, users generates more money. That's always a good thing. But on the other hand, there are a lot more devices on Android. So it's easier to develop for iOS, only one operating system, fewer resolutions. But again, the market share of Android is a lot bigger. Now, in terms of competition, there are a lot of apps on both stores. So it doesn't really matter. But here's the cool thing. So iOS is making a lot more money. But if you still want to do Android, you might want to consider going to the Chinese stores. There are like 300 different app stores. They're not using Google Play. And that's a very surprising insight that we got, that half of the money that's being generated on Android is being generated on other stores other than Google Play. So it's a lot more complicated to go on Chinese web stores, app stores, but it's very lucrative. Like half of the revenues are coming from there. You need to localize, you need to know how to upload your APK, but if you're going on Android, I would consider that. Now, of course, the number of apps keeps growing, but it doesn't mean that you're not going to generate a hit. Like every once in a while, there's a new hit. It doesn't matter how many apps are there. So that's kind of an optimistic, part of a lot of apps, but you can still make it. This is extremely interesting. The app, not only games, but the entire app ecosystem is going to generate this year $40 billion. So you understand how huge that is? That's the only year that the revenues from mobile apps is actually passing the revenues from consoles. So gaming on consoles made less money than apps. That's huge. And from the entire ecosystem of games, installs, the market share of that, only 15%, it's a huge number, but only 15% belongs to the big players. So Supercell, Rovio, King. So there's a lot of room for other players. Of course, indie developers are right there at the end of the long tail. But again, there's a lot of room there. It's not ruled by a few giants. So, different apps, different app categories have different usage and different retention. Games specifically, if you're in the game industry, you should know that people are using it a lot. The usage is very high, but people tend to churn very fast. And when you go deeper into that, through games, you see that different type of games have different type of usage and retention. Now, that's extremely important to understand. If you're buying media or if you're developing your own app, extremely hard, very important to understand, because different apps, different categories need different type of monetization, different type of media, because they're behaving differently. Let me go deeper into that. So marketing strategies. Now, I'm not going to tell you that, media doesn't work, because it doesn't. No, it does. But it does only for big companies, okay? So the thing is, you see those big companies, they spend a lot of money on media to stay up there. Now, I'm not saying don't buy media. You should buy media, but don't build your entire marketing strategy on media. Because, going head-to-head with those guys is going to be extremely difficult, extremely expensive, and that's not a good marketing strategy. What you should do is first of all, find different niche. Find countries where it's less crowded. So everybody wants to go to the big markets where the average per user is very high. But again, the media cost is very high, and everybody's competing on that. So try to find markets with less competition. Try to find categories. If you're doing ASO especially, try to find categories that are not in the main category, not games. Try to find a subcategory where you can really compete. Now that's obvious, right? Everybody wants to get featured. The thing that is not obvious, getting featured is nothing to do with luck. You really need to build a relationship with the guys that choose the games to get featured. So, build a real relationship with those guys. Ask them, what do I need to do to get featured? And, a lot of companies actually build the entire company around that. So getting featured is key, and it's nothing to do with luck. You should work on that. I know a few companies that actually have a person only for that, to build a relationship. Now, cross-promotion. That's by far the best strategy for marketing, in my opinion, on mobile. Now, here you can see that people that use this app also use those apps. And you can see that in highest correlation, all the apps belong to the same developer. Catch up. So if you have a good strategy is build small apps. Because the retention is so small, people are constantly churning, try to flip them between apps. But if you only have one app, you can't do that. So if you only have one app, you do this. Try to find the correlation between other apps and your app, and close a deal with them. Like, I'm going to give you my remnant traffic, you're going to give me my remnant traffic. We're going to move our users between them. Once users stop playing your game, move them to my game. And the other way around. But that strategy will only work if you'll find the right correlation. So, finding other apps that can send you traffic, but with lower correlation, won't convert. You're going to get tons of traffic, but nobody's going to use it. Nobody's going to install, you're not going to make money. It's pretty pointless. So your homework is finding the highest correlation between your app and other apps. Now, it doesn't matter how you bring your users, cross-promotion, ASO, media, you need to find out how many users you lost the first day, how many users you lost after a week. I wouldn't go any further than that. I mean, how many users you lost after a month? On most cases, pretty much all of them. Not all cases, but most cases. So first day in a week, that's a good benchmark. If you think the fourth day or third day is a good benchmark for you, do that. But compare yourself against the category. You might be above the category, you might be below the category, you might have a lot of room to improve. Take the category, take yourself, and find out how you're doing. You can see that Catch-Up did an extremely good job. They're way above the entire category. So after 30 days, they still have a lot of users. And the game above it, like after 30 days, almost have no users. So should definitely work on that. Definitely find out how your users are behaving, how the category behaves. Like if the entire category doesn't have user after 30 days, either switch category or, just know that that's the way it is and try to move them to another app. Now, here's a tip that has nothing to do with data, but we thought it's going to be interesting for you guys. A lot of the successful companies starts with royalty-free brands. So, like for example, Catch-Up took this very cool game, very simple game, which is an open source, and built most of the success of the company through that. And Toptail took a children's book. So you kind of have a known brand, which you don't have to pay royalty for, and you can build you take a lot of free content to build your stuff. You don't need to invent your entire content. So understanding how your users are behaving, not only through days, but through the day, like different hours, how they behaving, your users compared to the category is crucial. Because if you don't have any data of your own, you just started, fine, take the category, and like for example here, the blue line. So you see users are using it during the night for that category. Buying most of the media during the night. But once you have data, don't forget about the category, but your users are what's important, your loyal users. So, adjust accordingly. You can see here that buying media through the night on your users is pretty pointless. Once you have data, always look at it compared to the category. See if you can improve. But you should really learn how to look at your users. Now, here's a really cool strategy. That image, by the way, was took from Chartboost blog, by the way, a great blog, about how Clash of Clans are advertising in Japan. And you can see once we analyze the app itself, people are using the app throughout the day, but not at night. So throughout the day, they're not at home. You want to find them where they are. Basically, transportation, basically subway stations. So advertising for such an app on subway station in Japan, that's a great idea. On another app, people are using it mostly at night. Mostly at night. So people like to consume their digital entertainment mostly at night. And, building a TV commercial for that makes a lot of sense. And by the way, they made that TV commercial for the Super Bowl, and that drove a lot of installs. Okay, so to sum up, basically know your users. Do a lot of cross promotion. You're not gonna get them for a long time. You're gonna stay there for a few days, maybe a week, maybe 2 weeks. You need to keep moving them, unless your game is extremely addictive. And understand your category, understand what's the retention, understand what's the usage, and build most of your marketing strategy around that. That's it.
So you're talking about targeting and identifying the targets. I mean, do you have any more information you could give us on how do you identify who you should be targeting in advertising? You talked about putting it in a train station, but that's a very general sort of thing. Is there any way of actually being more targeted, especially because those are very expensive? I mean, Clash of Clans is obviously a huge brand. They've got a huge opportunity to do that. But for small developers, what sort of things could they do to actually try and drive up their acquisition? Have you got any thoughts on that?
Yeah. Well, obviously, producing a TV commercial is super expensive. But with targeting, once you know your audience, so once you go through, like, if we go back, so, right? So once you know which other apps the user is using, you can approach them and you can either buy the media through them or, cross promotions. That's pretty cheap. If you're starting with a small budget, I would go there. Again, using lookalikes on Facebook also works. There are different techniques, and of course, ASO.
Okay. Questions? What about niche games? I'm quite curious about niche games. So I have a friend, and he runs a games developer, and they do train simulators. Now, it's not free to play, but that's a great niche because they know exactly who their players are, they know where they go, they know what they read. That works. And you were talking about niche, and you were talking about using kind of royalty-free brands, which are like Christmas and stuff like that. Is there other things in there, especially in the free-to-play space? Because it's not something I've seen. I've seen most of the free-to-play tries to go this mass market because they're trying to hit the Candy Crush or the Clash of Clans. The niche stuff seems to be much more aimed at the more, I suppose, high-payer type specific markets. Do you have any thoughts on what kind of niches you could do, especially in the free-to-play space?
Well, I think once you find a niche, once you're trying to figure out a niche, you can't, the flip side of a niche is you can't spend a lot of money on it because you're not going to go to the mass, right? So, obviously I would go through the strategy of trying to open source through that or using stuff that actually works. But with niches, you really need to dig into them. There's no one strategy to find them. If there were, everyone
would have them. Okay. Any questions? Okay, great. Well, thank you very much. Thanks, Tal. That was really good.